Chapter 13, Marketing. As noted in class previously, marketing encompasses advertising, but it is not synonymous with advertising. Marketing is the entire set of activities that goes into creating, communicating, delivering, placing, figuring out how to get the product to people, figuring out what people want, developing the product, getting it to the customers, figuring out the price, the whole category of everything that needs to happen to get a product, a good or service out to the public, the consumers, is basically defined in all of marketing. Marketing is based on the exchange process. Exchange is simply what we're talking about with sales. So if you've got a company that's making something and a customer that wants to buy it, there'll be a product, a provider, and a customer. If the customer wants something and they're willing to give money because they consider it to be a good value, they'll purchase the product, a good or service, or some type of experience that may be a provider, a company of some sort, also known as the seller. They're going out there to find out what these people want. And if it's going to be satisfactory on both sides, then they conduct a transaction. Usually something for value is exchanged for something of value. So if I want to go buy a computer, I've determined that the value of the computer is worth the money that I'm going to spend on it. We conduct a transaction and I get the product. Parties on both sides try to get as much out of it. I try to get the best product that I can. The company selling it to me tries to get the most amount of money in the price while cutting its costs to the greatest degree possible in order to enhance profit. The marketing function generates value for companies because they create the products, they create the connections between peoples and products. They also try to figure out what companies and customers want because companies may sell to other companies as well as regular consumers. The role of marketing is basically to identify, satisfy, and retain customers. You have to identify them to be able to make sure that they're going to know about your product or service so that they can buy it. You want to be able to give them something that is good quality so that they're satisfied by it. And if they are satisfied, chances are they will be repeat customers. When you go out to try to find customers, there is a customer acquisition cost. You can calculate that. The amount of money that you spend doing outreach, doing advertising, all of that, you can compare that to the amount of money that you make through sales. You can calculate the number of customers you have. Hopefully you can get some type of surveys or some type of questionnaires to figure out how many people keep coming back and buying the product again. If you have a one-off customer, somebody who buys something once and leaves, the cost of that customer acquisition is gone. If you can pay the money to get the customer to buy your product, your good or service, and then they keep coming back, the cost of customer acquisition drops every time they come back and make a purchase. That makes the company more profitable in the long run. The role of marketing is primarily to identify customers, figure out what they want, what they need, find out if you have a product or service or some type of good or service that you can get to them, identify who they are, what target demographic they consist of, and how to get the information that you need to get to them so that they'll be interested in purchasing your product. Company orientation for marketing, that means that the companies can focus on the customer, the product, the sales, or the production. I don't think it's a this or that. I think you have to do a little bit of everything. If you are a wholesaler, you're probably not worried about production. You are worried about finding customers, in this case, retailers most likely. So it does vary from company to company, but different companies will have different focuses. Most of the time, if you are a company that is manufacturing, you're going to be worried about production. You're still going to be worried about sales and who your customers are, even if it's just wholesalers rather than end users. The types of company orientations, the marketing concept looks at finding out as much about the consumer as you can, and then figure out how to market that product and create strategy decisions on the basis of that information. The product concept focuses on building and showcasing the product itself. You're not really focusing as much on the consumer. You're selling the consumer your product because the product is supposed to be the best in the field. The sales concept really focuses on convincing people to buy it through advertising and personal sales. The production concept focuses on low production costs. You want to get low-cost supply chain products so that you can manufacture them into low-cost products and pocket the difference as a profit. The way that you put things together as well, or the services that you provide, you want to make that as highly efficient as possible and get the product out to as many people as you can. This whole thing is based on value. Value is really something that someone decides is worth it to them. There's something that provides utility. It's more than just the price, because if I want to get value, that doesn't mean it's basically the cheapest thing. If I buy a product and it falls apart and then I have to go buy it again, there's not a lot of value to that. If it means paying a little bit more, then I may have better value. So I'd be willing to pay more to get something of higher quality. Whatever satisfies me as an individual subjectively is really what comes down to, which is why it's so difficult for companies to figure out the psychology behind their consumers. What makes people want to buy their product? That's an answer that they're always trying to get, and it's very difficult sometimes to figure it out. Ultimately, though, a person will value something if the benefit provided to them is greater than the cost that they expend to get it. What is valuable for one person may not be of value for another. I may want to spend a lot of money to get a very expensive car because I like the image that it projects. Other people may think that that's crazy and they want to buy a cheap car. It's the personal view, which is subjective, so it does not apply all across the board. If you understand what type of customers are buying your product or what type of product you have, is it a high level? Is it a glamorous product? Is it something that's very expensive and exclusive? Or is it more of a run-of-the-mill thing? The way you design that product and the market that you're going after will dictate ultimately what the advertising portion of your marketing plan will be. Even if you find out who your customers are, the fact is that you've got competitors out there providing products, goods, and services that may be something that other people could buy instead of your product. If they have a better value, they will go to that other product. So you always have to look at what the customers are buying. You have to look at what your competitors are doing to find out if you can provide the wants and needs of your consumers better than the competition. The thing that happens with competition is you may have somebody offering a very similar product. They'll try to say why it's different, whether it's just cheaper or a better product or people like it better, customer loyalty, whatever it may be. These are the types of things you generally see in advertising. If you run out of a product, somebody may buy a substitute because you haven't done your processes correctly. You have a shortage. If people can't get your product, they'll buy something else that's a substitute. It won't be exactly the same thing, but it will provide something to customers if you can't provide it to them. That's why it's always a good idea to not have production problems. You want to make sure your production capacity is up to par, because if people buy a substitute, they may find it acceptable and continue to buy that, and the other company will be retaining your customer. Competitive advantage is when you have a company that is able to do something better than the competition. It doesn't matter if the competition is operating at 100% efficiency. They've got better materials, they've got better employees, they've got better equipment. They're able to do it more quality and cheaper than you can. What you want to do is put yourself in the position to succeed by getting a competitive advantage over your business competition. Part of the way that you can do that is to differentiate your product from the other guy's product. If you have a similar product that another company is doing, you want to highlight what's different about yours. It's a better product, it's a better quality, people like it better, it tastes better, it lasts longer, whatever it may be. Companies always, through their advertising especially, and through the information provided on their website, they try to show why it's different. You get a lot of clutter out there in the marketplace. People have a difficult time trying to figure out what to buy. If something stands out to them, they'd be more likely to get it. So if you have a differentiated product and you have a competitive advantage because it's different, which gets people attention, and it's cheaper, which also will get their attention, and it has a high quality and lasts longer, that will also get their attention. You'll be able to get those customers and retain them, and therefore lower your customer acquisition costs and make more money down the line. This all comes up in what's known as the value proposition. It's basically what you're telling the customer about why they should buy your product. And it should set your product apart, otherwise known as differentiation. So you can tell them why they should buy your product and why it's different from others. The elements of the value proposition consist of the who, what, when, where, why, how type of questions. So who, it doesn't necessarily name the target buyer, but you have to know something about your target buyer. You're going to look at your market segment and figure out if you're marketing to teens, that's who the who is. That's the answer to that. If you're marketing to middle-aged people, if you're marketing to people who are parents with children, whatever it may be, that will help you figure out exactly who your buyer is, what kind of products they're going to want, and how best to suit their needs. The what is the product, the good or service that you're creating. Why is you have to tell the buyer why they should be buying it, why it's different, why it's best for them. And the how is how do you get that effective value proposition? So really what you're looking for is clear, short, direct, memorable things that you can tell your customers so that they'll remember it. If you give them a 10-page brochure, the chances are they're not going to read it. That's why most commercials are 15 to 30 seconds long. Customer service is kind of a lost art with the advent of the internet and automated phone systems. Managing customer relationships does rely a lot today on AI, the internet, social media, both to reach out to people, but also to handle customer complaints and inquiries. You want to make sure that that initial contact with customers is a good one. They always say first impressions last. So if you make a good impression, they buy a good product, they're very likely to become, or more likely to become, a lifetime customer, which would give the company value. So we mentioned customer acquisition. Customer lifetime value is really a calculation that you're able to do to find out how much profit you can make by getting a customer to continue to be this retained customer and come back for repeat purchases. If you have a $100 customer acquisition cost and they buy $50 worth of material and they buy it once and then go away, you don't have much value there. If you have a $100 customer acquisition cost and they come back year after year after year and spend $1,000 or $5,000, then it's going to be a much higher level of profit. That's why this is such an important aspect of the marketing process. I'm not really going to go through this chart. You can just read through it. It's kind of self-explanatory. One of the things that can give you a competitive advantage if you have a good process for customer relationships. If you have the type of company where a customer has a problem, they call up and it gets rectified quickly, and the customer is happy with that, then that's going to give you a competitive advantage over a place where a customer can't get through to anybody, they can't return a product, the product doesn't work, they become frustrated. That's an opportunity for you to become their business partner, and you can sell them your products. And the ability to do that type of service provision can give you a competitive advantage on top of processes and employees and products. The other thing is if you have customers that are happy with your product, they will go out and through word of mouth tell other people. You can pay money for advertising, but the best advertisements are sometimes when people just tell people what a great product they have and they recommend it to someone else. That also is a great way to cut down on your customer acquisition costs because you're not even paying for that. You're getting it by providing really good service and really good products. And then you are able to get basically a windfall, these additional purchases that happen simply because of your reputation. There are a number of things that do influence consumer decisions. There are situational factors, personal factors, psychological factors, and social factors. The next slide here has a chart that'll give you kind of a breakdown of what goes into each. The situational factors, the buying tasks, the type of market offerings that are available. The personal factors are the demographics, the segment of the market that may find your product offering appealing. The life stage, which is basically how old someone is. Are they children? Are they teens? Are they midlife? Are they parents? Are they retired? What type of lifestyle do they live? Are they active? Do they travel a lot? And what type of personality do they have? Psychological factors, what may motivate somebody to purchase something? Are they willing to learn about the product? What kind of attitudes and beliefs do they have? That may have an impact on what kind of companies they want to do business with. Societal factors play a role as well. Culture, subculture, social class, your family, other reference groups, your peers, they may all have an influence on why someone actually goes out to purchase something. So those are the factors influencing consumer decisions. At the bottom of the slide, you see the consumer making decision process and the factors that go into that. The consumer decision-making process starts with need recognition. You're hungry, you need food, you want to buy new clothes, you need to buy a house or a car, whatever it is, you have to recognize that you have it. Then you need to start looking for information and doing the processing to find out what type of product would best provide the value that you're looking for. You need to know how much money you can spend, etc. You would look at what types of products might fill your needs or what other alternatives you want to compare to. Then you have to make your purchase decision. And then your post-purchase behavior is, do you buy more? Do you buy a different product because you're not happy with it? Whether the process is involving a simple decision-making process, this can be expedited much more quickly. If I'm thirsty, I'll just go buy a bottle of water or something. If I want to buy a car, I'm probably going to do a lot more research because there's a lot more money behind it. So in a complex decision making, you pretty much follow the same path, but you would probably provide more detail or collect more detail for each step of these processes. Companies have to identify who their target market is. By doing so, you can figure out who is most likely to buy your product, and the costs of customer acquisition can be minimized because you won't be marketing to people who have no interest in your product. So identify the customer that you need to contact, figure out what separates them from the rest, what types of behaviors they exhibit so that you can figure out the way to reach them most effectively, and then do some research and validate the market opportunity on that basis. Some of the things that they look at are demographics, that's men and women, age groups, geographic locations, etc. There's also behavioral patterns, what people buy for whatever reason, sociographic and psychographic, the way they think about something and the way their peers have impact on it. All of these things play into defining your target market. When you define what the total market consists of, then you can break down the market into segments that are going to be appealing to you. And you may have multiple market segments for your products. You may have a low-end product and a high-end product. Those would be marketed to two different market segments. So for the example here, we've got people who restore classic automobiles, people who drive old cars and then don't really pay much attention to it, people who buy your Porsches and Ferraris, truck drivers, motorcycle owners. You may be providing transportation, but the type of transportation you provide could vary depending on what these people are buying and whether or not you're providing a product that they would find valuable to them. Companies do a lot of work on market research. They do focus groups, they do surveys, they do product samples, things of that nature, to try and get feedback from the customers to make sure that they're on the right path, that they're providing the right product at the right price point, and that the customers would be interested in it and that they would be satisfied after purchasing it. The marketing information system is a representation of all of the people, technology, and processes that go into the marketing plan and the marketing information that is put out. That is also part of the market research process. So you're going to get as much information about it so that when you're ready to do your advertising and market contacts, you'll know exactly who you're going to be going after. Questions to be answered by market research: who is your customer, or more accurately, who is your target market out of the market segment from the total market? What types of problems or needs and wants are they trying to satisfy when they buy your product, either a good or a service? What is the customer looking for in terms of being satisfied? Is it a simple one-off product, or is it something that they want to have and use for 5 or 10 years? How does the customer get that information? Are they getting it online? Are they getting it through magazines, media, social media, the internet, whatever it may be? Where does the customer choose to purchase? Are they going to be buying at a brick and mortar retail place? Are they going to be going only local? Do they order it? Do they go online and do it through Amazon? The next one, though, is why does the customer buy or not buy? That is the million-dollar question, literally. And that's something that people in business really want to find out. If I put out to the market a product and people don't buy it, answering why they didn't buy it is going to allow me to correct the process so that we can become more competitive. When does the customer make the purchase? Is it early in their process? Is it later in the process? Is it simple? Is it complex? Could it be dictated by the time of the year? If I'm selling skis, I know that they're going to be buying it probably getting ready for ski season, or maybe just after if there's a sale. How does the customer go about seeking satisfaction in the market? Are they going to be looking at a lot of competitors? Are there places where they go and they buy the same type of product? If we know that, we can look at what those products are and figure out if we can do it better. So the market research process here is defined in these 5 steps on this chart. Again, you identify the problem. Really, it's a need or a want that the customers are trying to satisfy. You do your objectives, you do your research questions, you develop the research plan, figure out what kind of information you need, what your market is going to look like. Then you conduct the research. It's almost a plan to make a plan. You're trying to figure out where you're going to be doing the research, and then you actually conduct the research. The next step is to get that information and analyze it, and then report the findings to your marketing team so that they can figure out what to do with it and make decisions that would hopefully make your product as compelling as possible in the marketplace. The next and last step is just to take action. You go through the planning, you evaluate all of your options, and you make your decisions. And if things aren't working the way that you wanted them to, it's kind of a recursive process. That means you have to kind of go back. So once you take action, it's not that unusual to just quickly go back through all 4 steps preceding the action to find out where you may have made a mistake so that you could get a better outcome. The marketing mix refers to the factors that go into what can influence a customer's decision about what to buy and how to buy it, what product to buy. And this is famously, and for years, has been known as the 4 Ps. The 4 Ps are product, promotion, price, and place. The product is the good and service itself. It's whatever it is that you're offering. And you go back to the previous slides, and you have to go through all the research to figure out what that product is going to be and how you're going to create it. The promotion is really the information that's provided through advertising or through other consumer relations in order to get people aware of your product so that they know that it's an option for them to buy. The place is how you're going to distribute that product or get it delivered to people. You can sell directly to them through your website. You can sell it to a wholesaler that goes to a retailer, or you can have a limited number of retailers that you deal with directly. However you do that is going to have an impact on your profit margin because there are costs associated with selling directly, but when you sell directly, that money goes straight to you. There's no markup by going to a middleman, by going to a wholesaler or a distributor. That can also give you a competitive advantage in the marketplace because if you have direct sales, even though there is an expense associated with it, it's typically less than it would be to go to a wholesaler, which means that you can offer your product for a cheaper price than it would otherwise be. The price is really one of the most difficult things because you have to figure out what your supply chain is going to be if you have to get materials that you're adding value to for your final production. The cost of those, if they go up, the cost of your materials are going to go up. The price that you charge to people is going to go up. Calculating the price means that you have to really pay attention to all of the things that go into creating your product. And you have to look at the market. You also have to look at consumers because competitors are going to offer prices. You have to be able to be competitive with them. And consumers are going to have a price point that they find appealing. If the soda is $1.50, that's probably a good price. If it's $10, most people probably aren't going to buy it. So you have to understand what the competition is offering and what people are willing to pay for a particular product so that you can figure out how to get it to them at the price point that's going to make it appealing for them to purchase your product. Even though the four Ps have been involved in marketing for decades, they've come up with something called the four Cs. This is within the last 20 or 30 years or so. It's really not that much different. You've got the consumer solution, that's really the product. You've got communication, which is really the promotion. You've got convenience, which is actually the place. And you've got cost, which is the price. I don't like calling it cost because I guess it's a cost if you're looking at it at the end user, the consumer, because it's what they're paying for it. But as we said earlier in the class, price and cost are two different things. The cost is what it took you to get your product ready to be offered, and the price is what you bring in through the sale as revenue. If you look at it from the customer's point of view, any price that you pay is a cost to get that product. So I guess that's why they call it cost here. It's really not that much different, but it does focus more on the customer. But it does match up with the four Ps. It's just a way to be more consumer oriented in order to get that competitive advantage of having good customer relations. Next slide is just a representation of the marketing mix. You look at your target market and then you figure out the four Ps to get that to them. Next slide, again, I'm not going to go through this on the lecture, but you can read through it. It's relatively simple. It's a comparison between the four Ps and the four Cs and gives you some information about how to differentiate between them and what they have in common. One of the Ps is the product. So you're looking at the product as a solution. What does the customer want or need? What type of features, what type of design, what type of experience are they looking for? We can also add to that the name of the product. Some names are more appealing than others. The way that you brand it. There are a lot of trademarks and ways that customers understand what the product is through the name. So a lot of the marketing is also giving it a good name. You don't want to have a product that has a name that doesn't sound good because people might be turned off by it, even if it's the best product in the world. And we've already discussed differentiation. What's going to be different about your product or service that anybody else is offering that would make it distinguished so that people would find it attractive and purchase yours? The other P that we're looking at here is promotion. You're looking at the messaging that you're doing. Can be traditional advertising, whether it's through print media or airwaves, radio, TV, cable, but it's also social media and internet as well as your own website. The message that you have should be consistent across all platforms. The method of delivering the message can vary slightly depending on the vehicle that you're using to get the message out there. The timing of the delivery is important because if you're having a sale, again, if you're a company that makes skis, you want to probably start advertising in September. When I'm recording this, it's just after Halloween, and all I'm seeing is Christmas advertisements, which is not a lot of fun knowing that that's going to happen for the next 2 months. But the timing of delivery of the message is what these companies are looking for because a lot of companies make more than half of their money during the holiday season. Communications by customers and influencers, you want to make sure that the influencers, which is a newer thing, You can have a YouTuber endorsing your product. You could have other people on social media tweeting about it. Whatever they're doing, it really should be in line with the general promotion standards that we're trying to put out through all of our channels. You also want to pay attention to what the competitors are doing. So if they're having a price cut, you may want to match that price cut. You'll often see companies go out there and say, if you find it at a cheaper price, we'll match it. The other P here is place. So how do you go about buying it? Where are you going to buy it? Is it going to be at a brick and mortar store? Is it at a big chain? Is it a local convenience store? How easy is it for people to get access to it? How quickly can they get access to the distribution channels? What type of sales force do you have? Do you need to have people working to sell something? Again, more complex purchases, which is typically more sophisticated products or more expensive products, you may actually need to have salespeople going out there to explain what's going on in person. And you also want to look at how the competitors do the same thing. If they offer it one way, you may want to offer it that way, plus another way that could satisfy the needs and wants of your consumer base. And finally, the last P is price. What type of value are we giving to the buyer? If we can compare our price to the competitors and we can compare our quality, part of our messaging could also be related to the price. So if you have a price that's out of line with the purchase point that the customers are going to be interested in, it's going to be a hard sell, literally. You want to look at price sensitivity. Are you in the type of a market where your product is going to have more sales the lower the price and far fewer sales the higher the price? Or are you in the type of market like food, for example? Prices of food continue to go up, but people have to eat. So there is not as much price sensitivity to that. They may stop buying the high-end goods and services. They're going to have to get the product anyway, so they're going to keep buying it. For luxury items or things that are kind of frivolous, there may be a lot of price sensitivity. So if your price goes up too much and we're in the middle of a recession, you could see a very significant drop in sales due to the pricing. Do you want to give discounts? Do you want to give rebates? Those types of things. You want to make sure that if you're doing a sale, that you're not going to be losing money doing this. A lot of companies don't spend a lot of time figuring out how to do their discounts and their rebates and whatever types of sales that they're having. There was kind of a famous case where a sporting goods company kept losing money. And the new management came in and they said, well, why are we doing the sale here in the spring? And they said, well, we always do a sale in the spring. And they did a little bit of research and they found that they were doing a sale in the spring because 10 years earlier, they had an overabundance of products that they needed to get rid of. And typically, the way you move excess product is to lower the price to give an incentive for people to purchase it. The problem is, once they did it one year, staff just decided to keep doing it every year, whether they had a surplus or not. So what they were doing is they were eating into their profit margin and they weren't making as much money as they should have been because they were offering sales that didn't have a reason behind them. You also want to look at the competitor pricing. Now, if the competitors are doing sales at the same time, that's different. But in this case that I was giving you for an example, there was no competitors doing sales. They were doing sales and they were moving a lot of product, but because they had cut the price for no real good reason, they didn't have a surplus, they weren't making as much money as they could have been. You need to find the right marketing mix. So how are we going to price our stuff? What's the place going to be? What's the promotion strategy going to be? What are the products that we're going to have? Do we need to introduce new products as times change? You need to make sure that all of your marketing research people are involved, along with your sales and even the finance and other strategy makers at the higher levels, because your product is really the lifeblood of the company. So how you get it out to your customers is really the key point of every company's objectives. Last couple of slides here, there's another marketing mix. This is for an example of shampoo, and they're going to go through the 4 Ps, talk about discount products, upscale products, and premium products. You can read through that. And then the last couple of things you need to do is create your marketing strategy and make sure it's aligned with everything that you're doing. You may have different product lines and you may have different marketing strategies for different product lines. You could be selling discount shampoo and premium shampoo at the same time, so you would have 2 different strategies for each of those products. You could have a lot of discount products all in the same category, like in shampoo, soap, toothpaste, but you don't have any premium brands. So you can maybe borrow from other products that you're doing for the discount strategies for that. But it really depends on what the mission of the company is, and you should make it fit what you're trying to achieve. Last slide here is just a little image here talking about the planning process. You come up with a corporate mission. You look at where we are, the external factors, the internal factors, come up with a corporate strategy, and then your marketing team takes all of that from the higher level managers and they go through the whole research and production of the marketing strategy using the 4 Ps. Then they implement that strategy, and then they go back and evaluate it to find out how good it's going. The next thing we're going to do is chapter 14, the marketing mix. First thing we want to look at is what is a product. Right in the beginning of the semester, we said that a product is either a good or a service, but it really is a bundle of attributes. It's all of the features, functions, benefits, and uses of that product or service, or good or service, that a person gets as a benefit in exchange for something of value. Product can be anything that you offer, a good or a service. It can be tangible or intangible. It can also include things like customer satisfaction. So if I'm selling a product and it's tangible, how a customer feels about buying that is also part of the value proposition. So that is an intangible portion to a tangible product. Product marketing is when you look at the marketing mix that we discussed in chapter 13, how it's going to be priced, promoted, and distributed. If you look at the product and figure out what kind of value it provides to the customer, then your marketing mix is easier to manage. If you do not have a product that provides exceptional value, then you may be able to mitigate that or offset that a little bit by focusing on the other aspects of the marketing mix, but you may have to go back to the drawing board and work on that product. And how you develop that product is going to have a direct influence on how much the price is going to be because of your costs to get the materials to produce it. The types of product categories that you want to look at, there's convenience. These are quick, easy buys, something that's simple. You pick up a dozen donuts, you get a bottle of Advil, really basic stuff that doesn't cost a lot of money, and they probably don't have a lot of thought behind it. It's usually customer experience is what really gets them to be repeat customers. If they're satisfied the first time and it's only a few bucks, they're not going to spend a lot of time researching it. If it works, they'll just keep going back to the same source. The types of products that you would shop for, that doesn't mean just going out and picking up something. Shopping in the context of comparing one product to another. You go through the mall and you go to store and you figure out where you want to spend your money. These are typically more expensive or at least more complicated products. Shoes, microwaves, refrigerators, obviously cars and computers and things like that. Specialty products are something that are relatively unique, so you may have customers who are willing to go and look for them. Also, may have a harder time figuring out where these customers are because they may be few and far between. So if you can do a good job at figuring out where these people congregate and the types of resources that they rely on, and you can tap into that for part of your marketing through your advertising, that can be a big advantage to you if you do offer specialty products. Unsought products are relatively difficult to market, and the examples here are funeral plots and pest control. I do see pest control. Once in a while, I'll see like a funeral home advertisement. A lot of people don't like to make wills and do their estate planning because they have to think about what it's going to be like when they die. These are still products that people need, and you do need to do the marketing mix and make sure that the information is available to them. But you have to be cognizant of the fact that people don't seek these products out. How do you reach people for something that they need, but they don't really want to think about? And that can be a challenge. A brand is what you come up with when you create your product, and it's really something that identifies what's going on here. It's a name, the sign, the symbol, the design. You have a Toyota, that's your brand. You have a model, a Corolla. It's been around for decades. People know what a Toyota Corolla is. There is a symbol on the front of the car with the little interlocking circles. People recognize it. McDonald's, Coca-Cola, Nike. There's a lot of brand signs and brand names that are part of the lexicon. It's just part of the regular vocabulary for people because these companies have done such a great job of insinuating themselves into society that it's become just part of life almost. But it still is a business, and they had to achieve that level of market penetration so that people could identify it just at a quick glance. The promise is basically what you're giving to people, what you're telling them they're going to get if they part ways with their money. So you're going to give them something of value. The asset is the reputation of the marketplace. So that can help you attract customers. It can help drive premium prices. This is also kind of an intangible portion of it. It's also known as goodwill. It's basically what your brand reputation is. Tied to that very closely is the perception. So if you look at everything there is about a product, Toyota Corollas are usually affordable cars. They have a good record of being reliable and retaining their value. Even after a while, if they don't, because that has been such an established perception for such a long time, that perception may linger. You may need to be careful about how you go about dealing with a problem in production. So if your product is not quite as good as it used to be and you need time to correct it, If you have a good perception because of your reputation through the marketplace, through years of good provision of service and goods, then you may be able to get away with it for a little while. So you have a larger margin of error. The reputation can go a long way. The people who buy the product when it's not being made particularly well, they're not going to be super happy about it. But the general perception may be enough to smooth over any problems that you had until you can fix them. Mindshare is kind of a jingoistic term. It's basically referring to, they say, on a hold on the customer's mind here. Some people only want to buy certain products. They have brand loyalty. Some people will never buy a particular product because they think that it's their perception of it is terrible. So you have the reputation through the asset, you have the perceptions, and then the result of that is what people actually think about it. And that's what's referred to here as the mind share. Tangible and intangible elements, you've got your visual design, the logo, the color, the typography. We talked about the Toyota Corolla, for example. You know what the Toyota logo looks like. I think it's usually a red sign for Toyota. McDonald's with the yellow and the red, the Coca-Cola with the red and the white. You have distinctive product features. They're going to be a certain look. If the car goes down the street, it's harder to tell today, but in the old days, it was a lot easier. You could look at a car and say, well, that's a Chevy, that's a Ford, that's a BMW. Other intangibles are related to things like reputation, the customer experience, customer word of mouth, what they think of the reputation. The market perceptions that we're talking about, there's attributes, certain features that are out there. The benefits are what you can provide that can give people a better function, but it also goes to emotional or psychological benefits. If I really want to give the appearance that I've made it, I can buy a Mercedes. That's not really a tangible. I have a car, it's a Mercedes, but there may be something additional to that if I value the idea of driving around a Mercedes. So it can give me an emotional boost. The values of the company and the value of their operational principles are very important. Some people will only do business with companies that have a good reputation for being good to the environment, being, good in their marketing, the way they treat their employees, things of that nature. So if you have a bad reputation because of the way you treat your employees, or you've been caught like Volkswagen was a few years ago, lying about gas mileage, that can create some downward trends in terms of the perception, which can have an impact on sales. Every company has its own culture, just like every country does, every city, every state, every region. People can adhere to that and they can be attracted to it or potentially repulsed by it. There's also a personality attachment. Again, this is related to reputation. Brand itself has kind of a personality. I mean, it's not a living thing, but when you see a Mercedes, you may think, wow, that looks really, high class, or a BMW or a Porsche looks sporty. A brand can actually have a distinct personality of its own that people, if they feel that their personal personality is like that, they want to buy that product to match it up. The user may only want to buy brands that they think reflect who they are as an extension of themselves. So again, Mercedes, if you want to drive a Mercedes, you may think that that's the type of person you are, so you want to buy a Mercedes. If you don't care, then you'll go buy whatever it is that you want. The idea of a brand is that it should create value for both the consumer and the producer and the retailer. If you have a well-known brand name, it makes it a lot easier to buy things. So if you want donuts, you can go to Dunkin' Donuts. If you want coffee, you can go to Dunkin' or Starbucks or Mike's Donuts or whatever. There's only a few places that I know of that I would bother to go buy donuts, and it's just because they've penetrated the market to such a degree that I understand what the brand is. I know what I'm going to get when I go there. And that's a real quick shorthand, and it's convenient for the customer, but it's also great for the parties providing those products as well, because if you're Dunkin' Donuts, most people around the United States and other parts of the world know who Dunkin' Donuts are. So if I open up a Dunkin' Donuts, I'm going to have people coming in simply because of the reputation that it already has, because of the brand name and the brand loyalty. I can make money simply because of the brand. For the retailer, rather than the producer, this is the people who are buying a product who don't manufacture it and are selling it separately. And the example of Dunkin' Donuts, I suppose that could also be the franchisee. These are ways for you to be able to differentiate themselves from one another by having brands that people can relate to. So you could be a retailer that has a reputation based on the types of brands that you carry. You could be a high-end retailer and have all of the best, so-called best brands. You could also be a discount place like a Walmart or a Marshalls, and people will understand what they're going to get when they go there because of the types of branding that you've created through the products that you sell and their own brand image. Branding strategies, just read through these. You talk about a branded house. You got Apple, BMW. They are what they are. They're their own thing. You can have a house of brands where you have one company makes multiple products that are potentially similar, like Tang and Kool-Aid. You'd be selling them to probably two different groups of people, but they're very similar. You can have private label or store branding. Walmart has their own products. BJ's has their own. Stop and Shop has their store brand. They don't necessarily make them. They're just buying it from a generic producer and putting their label on it. You could also have no brand branding, which is just generic. People want to get a box of flakes. They're not cornflakes, they're just cereal. And those are those white box with the black label on it. It's basically cheap. Whether you like it or not, it's up to you, the customer, to figure it out. Personal and organizational branding, the company itself, the type of office or franchise could have their own particular way of branding it. And even places can be branded. An example they give you there is Las Vegas. You can have co-branding where two brands get together. You can see the Star Wars and the Campbell's soup on that image there. You can have people doubling up and doing, movie releases, not just the Star Wars, but I've seen plenty of commercials. Barbie, the movie Barbie, they were selling T-Mobile phones and some other things. So you can do brand licensing too. We talked about licensing earlier when we did international business and contracts and the legal part of it. When you're doing brand licensing, what you're doing is you're renting or leasing the right to use a brand in association with that product in a defined market. So if I have a license, it's a way to buy the brand reputation by being able to sell it myself without having to develop it myself. It's going to cost me money. It's going to be lower risk though, because people will already be aware of what the product is. Line extension and brand extension. If you have Campbell's tomato soup, you want to have minestrone, chicken noodle, whatever, you can extend the brand, and then you can offer other brand names to a different. You could have. I think Campbell's makes several different types of soup too. I don't know if they do chunky soup or whatever, but they have home style soups and low sodium and everything. So you have like sub brands that you can do. Some companies go into completely different brands, whether it be soup or drink or candy or whatever. You have to figure out, are you going to be extending within that? Are you going to be extending within the line or making a new different brand? Each product has a product life cycle. Typically, like anything else, you're born, you live, and you die. A lot of products are developed. They're introduced to the product. They have a period of growth. They plateau, they mature, and then eventually they decline. Some products just stick around forever. These are known as cash cows. They're products that people are always going to buy, and they don't seem to have any decline. They may have already plateaued, and they may have slight booms and busts in between. They're able to stick around. But a lot of products do disappear largely because of obsolescence, especially technological products. There's not a lot of people who have DVD players or VCRs or reel-to-reel tapes or cassettes or anything, or for that matter, even CD players or iPods. Most people just have their phone and they listen to music on Spotify. So if you are making CD players, there may be still somewhat of a market for it, but it's declined to the point where it's almost gone. The next slide just shows you an example of what it looks like. You will probably not be making too much profit. Your sales will be taking off, but you won't be really making a profit until you hit the growth cycle because you're trying to recoup all the money that you've already spent in product development. So you're losing money there. As the money starts to come in, you'll notice there is a gap between the green and the purple. As the sales go up, you eventually get into what is known as the black. You start making money. And then as the sales start to decline, you don't make as much money anymore and the profits start to dwindle. The company may decide to just scrap it because it's not worth it anymore. Or if it's plateaued and it's not going to decline to complete zero, they may just stick around with a diminished production capacity. You can read through the next couple of slides here just so that you can see what they're talking about. There's just more detail about each phase of the life cycle of a product. As you market through the product cycle in the introductory stage, you want to do a lot of marketing to get the buzz out there. You want to get people aware of it. A lot of times they'll be doing pilots, they'll be giving products away. Obviously, you're not going to be making a lot of money if you're giving your product away to get people interested in it. When you go to the supermarket, they got the food on the little sausages or whatever on the toothpick. That's kind of an example of getting people into buying a new product. It doesn't necessarily have to be that example, doesn't have to be only new products, but that is typical of a new product to get people to try it if they're not used to it. And they may not have ever noticed it before. So this is a way to get their attention. Next is the growth stage. You want to focus on differentiating your product from the competition that's around. Hopefully, if you've done your pricing and all of your four P's correctly, you'll end up having some success and you'll start moving more product. And as you move more products, you'll start to recoup the expense of creating it and start to turn a profit. As it matures, a plateau is basically where that spike in the curve starts to flatten out. Plateau is a flat plane. Marketers who focus on niche markets, they will have to do different promotional strategies in order to get new market share. Sometimes you'll rebrand or seek a different target market. Maybe other people beyond what you had originally intended might be interested. So you could have a little bit of a boost once you've plateaued, and you can find other people that might be interested in your product as well. Eventually, though, especially with technology, through obsolescence, the marketing spend is reduced because people aren't going to be buying it as much. So it doesn't really matter if you advertise quite as much. And then you either have to stop doing the product or you just have to reduce the amount of time that you spend producing it and just have a minimal amount. If it's still turning a profit, most companies will continue to do it. But if they can rededicate their resources to something else as an investment to make a bigger profit, then that product is probably going to go away. The new product development process, there's basically three phases with a couple of stages in each. Coming up with new product ideas, this should be focused on what people want and what they need, not what you think is a good idea, because you have to have a market that's willing to buy it. You'll pilot the ideas, you'll go through focus groups, you'll ask people what they think, you'll take surveys. Then you'll develop the product, you'll come up with beta, 2.0, you'll do a couple of refinements, and then you'll figure out the best way to produce it and keep your costs down. So you're going to come up with a business case analysis in phase 2, do your technical and marketing development based on the marketing mix that we discussed earlier. And then in phase 3, you do your test marketing. You can pilot it out in certain locations. You might not want to do a national release. You could just do maybe Boston and San Francisco. And then if it's successful there, then you can start rolling it out in a phased approach through other regions of the country in your overall major launch, which is stage 7. The business case analysis is just the planning that needs to go into figuring out whether or not you should move forward. You could spend a lot of time trying to develop a product, and you may find out through the research that it's not a good idea, and then you have to stop. Even if you already spent a lot of money, it would be worse to spend more money to bring a product to market that people aren't going to buy. You have to spend the time to figure out what's going on here. And if it's not going to work, you have to pull the plug. And there's a lot of products that have been on the drawing board that never got any further because it just wasn't practical. You have to look at the market opportunity. Are we introducing a new product? Are we getting into a mature product line? But maybe we have a different way of doing it that could be advantageous for our consumers. What kind of costs is it going to be to bring it to market? What is it going to look like through the life cycle? How is it going to fit into our regular portfolio? Is it something that fits in, or is it something we're going to have to spend more time and money managing it because it's unique? How would this product impact the brand? Is it going to enhance our brand? Is it going to detract from the brand? And how does it impact other corporate objectives, such as corporate social responsibility? So if we're using offshoring to create this and we're using a sweatshop somewhere in another country, is that going to harm our reputation among our marketplace? So we could have an intangible drop in our value as a result. Marketing communication, you should have integrated messages. You should have a steady message through all the varieties of channels that you're releasing information through your advertising, through your public relations, media, social media. Whenever you're talking to your target audiences, you want to make sure you stay on message. The integrated marketing communication plan should have a different way of reaching people. Not everybody will get information the same way. So if you can have an integrated, diverse way of getting a message out there, consistent and describing what the product is, then you're going to reach the greatest amount of people. You should also focus on the target segment, because the way you communicate to different target segments may be different depending on the way that they actually function. The next slide is about the promotion mix. So you look at your 4 Ps on the target market, then you're looking at advertising, public relations, personal selling, sales promotion, digital marketing, direct marketing, and so-called guerrilla marketing. Marketing communication, if you're looking at advertising, I think you all have a pretty good idea about what that is. Public relations is not necessarily advertising, although it should be consistent in the message. Public relations is telling people that we've done something good, or if something bad happened, we have to explain to them how we're fixing the problem. We just always want to communicate messages that will keep us in a positive light. Personal selling, sales promotion, these are things that we could use to try to move products. Usually these are going to be probably more expensive products. It's not going to be your $5, $10 things. But you want to do sales promotions as necessary, direct marketing, reaching out to people personally. The old-fashioned way is through doing mass mailing through the postal service. I don't know how effective that is anymore, But you can do direct marketing through social media where you can target the market to people that are more likely to purchase your products. So advertising is paid communication to try to get people interested in your good or service or the company itself. Sometimes if you're watching the TV, you'll see advertisements for various products, but then you'll see a clip that just advertises that you're watching CBS or NBC, just to remind you, that you're watching them because they have their own product that they're trying to sell, which is the opportunity to watch those shows. And the more people who watch, the more they can charge for their advertisers. We already talked about public relations, so just check through this slide as well. Personal selling is mostly focused on face-to-face interaction, so this is your actual salesperson. It doesn't have to be face-to-face, it could be online or it could be by phone. Typically, these are not going to be for your cheap one-off products. These are going to be for bigger buys, insurance products, cars, computers, things of that nature. Sales promotion is a way to get people interested in a product. Either it's a new product and people don't know about it, or it's a product that is plateaued and you're trying to get new interest in it. You can give coupons for money back. You can hold a sweepstakes or a contest. You have to be very careful about the legal ramifications of that because a lot of places do not allow lotteries other than the state that is running the lottery. So you have to be careful how that works. You can give rebates. You can give samples, loyalty programs, point of purchase displays. You can go to Subway and get the card and they can click off. If you buy 10 subs, you get one free. That's kind of a loyalty program. Most of you are familiar with all of these. The tricky part for the company, though, is to calculate the cost-benefit analysis of doing all of these. If we offer too much in the form of rebates and coupons and loyalty programs and benefits, we might be eroding our profit margin to the point where it's not really valuable for us anymore. So you have to have somebody to do the actual math. You want to be able to give a discount in the interest of making more sales so that you can increase your revenues and your profits. If you simply sell the same amount of stuff at a cheaper price, you're not going to make as much money. So that's going to be a problem. Direct marketing is when you sell directly to consumers. Catalogs, telemarketing, email. A lot of emails come in my junk folder. I don't really look at it. It's kind of a challenge. Some places still do it. I get a lot of junk mail. I get a lot of spam calls on my phone. Next slide is just talking about digital marketing. We've already talked about a lot of that stuff, so just please review this and what's in the text. Social media marketing, all of you who are on social media, you've probably seen how this works. There is a risk here by having influencers and other people pushing your stuff on social media if it's not the company itself, because they may go off message, they may have a bad reputation. You could have a really popular social media person who then gets arrested for something, and that could have a bad impact on your marketing capabilities. So you have to be careful about who you choose to do this type of thing. But most companies are doing at least some aspects in social media. Next slide talks about IMC, that's integrated marketing campaigns or communications. In order to support your marketing strategies, again, this is really, integration just simply means that you don't want to have people working in silos where they don't talk to one another. Your advertising has to be linked up with the way that you're doing your social media and your other outreach and your PR and your general sales pitches. So you want to make sure that it's integrated, meaning that they're all connected and tied together so that you have a cohesive message that's getting out there. One of the 4 Ps is the place, so you can look at channels of distribution as part of the marketing mix. These are basically where you're going to be selling your product. Do you sell it directly? Do you go through a retailer? Do you go online? Do you have a wholesaler? 5 important channel flows are the product flow, the negotiation flow, ownership flow, information flow, and promotion flow. Product flow is when you're talking about actually moving the product, the physical product, assuming it's a tangible product that you have. And you're going to get it from the manufacturer through, whether it's directly to a retailer or through a wholesaler, by the time it gets to the end user, the ultimate consumer. The negotiation flow involves all of the parties that are involved with getting the actual exchange process. So we're talking about sales here. Typically what ends up happening is if you purchase it at a retail location for the end user, that product has already been paid for unless they bought it on credit. So if it's on credit, when the retailer sells it, they get the money and then they pay off the wholesaler who then pays off the manufacturer. A lot of times, though, the manufacturer they're already out of that process by the time you get there. But there is some negotiation that has to go on for the price that they're going to charge to the wholesaler and the price that they're going to charge to the retailer, and then ultimately what the retailer is going to charge to the consumer. But it's all related to the exchange. The ownership flow is the title of ownership through the process. So if you go from the manufacturer to the wholesaler, you're making a sale. There's going to be a contract, and then that wholesaler has the legal right to own that material. And then same thing through the retailer to the end user. The information flow is the flow of information either up or down the channel. What you're telling the manufacturer, telling the wholesaler is going to be different than what the retailer hears and what the consumer is going to get at the end. But everybody needs to know information about that product and what the value of it is so that they can figure out how to make all of the other plans flow together correctly. And the promotion flow is all the information that you're doing regarding trying to get this thing sold. So it's the personal selling, advertising, promotions, and when necessary, PR, public relations. Here's a relatively complicated chart. I'm really not going to go through too much, but they look at all of the different flows and they show where you're talking about. So, for example, the manufacturer, you have a transportation company, you have to put your things in a warehouse or a storehouse. How do you get it out to the places where it's going to go? And then you talk about the negotiation flow, the ownership flow, and the information flow through all of these different places. So the other types of channels for one of the four P's place, as we said, you can sell directly to the consumer, you can go through retail, wholesale, or you can have an agent or a broker. I'm not going to go through this too much because we've talked about it at length, but you should be aware of the terms and make sure you understand it so you can be ready for it on the exam. The types of wholesale intermediaries, what do? They do purchasing, they hold the products in inventory, they transport it where it needs to be. They can do some grading to find out if the quality is okay. They can do the packaging or repackaging. Oftentimes, you may ship things out from a manufacturer on these big skids and these big packages of multiple cases of something. They need to maybe break that out into smaller packages so that it can be ready for sale when it gets to the retailer. They'll also pick up the risk of loss or the risk of a contract problem once they become owners of the stuff. They're going to have to do their own marketing to reach out to their retailers, and they're going to actually have to effectuate the distribution and get it to its end destination. The kind of retailers that distribute products are department stores, chain stores, supermarkets, discount places. You may have some warehouse retailers. These are like your wholesale, BJ's, Costco type of places. What they do is they deal with the manufacturers directly so that they can cut out the wholesale markup and cut down their prices, at least in theory. I think a lot of the warehouse retailers, they're just retailers with a fancy name and bigger packages. Franchises are also places that you can do. 7-Eleven is a franchise, but it's a convenience store. Malls, shopping centers, online retailing, etc. One of the four please is again place. So if you have supply chains and distribution channels, it's really what you're looking at to get all the raw materials, the products, to be able to build from those raw materials, and then get all the products and services moved out. So it's things coming in, things going out. Hopefully they get to their end destination so that customers can buy them. The point of the distribution channels is to reduce the number of transactions. If you can cut out 2 or 3 layers of the middlemen, then that means that you're not going to have to pay them a markup so that your price to the consumer could be cheaper. And also, if you have a good distribution channel that's well planned and well thought out, it can really make it easier to send the flow of goods to where they need to be, both in terms of time and in money. Slide 39 is just a chart about how these things work and all the different connections between the various distribution channels. So just take a peek. Supply chain versus marketing channels. The supply chain is really a broader thing than a marketing channel. A supply chain is how a manufacturer gets all the raw materials that they're going to add value to create their product or service. When you're talking about marketing channels, you're really looking at taking those supplies and turning them into something that the product is going to be sold to the customer. So your marketing channels are really with the customer in mind. It's the end result, which is the purchase. And marketing channels are part of the marketing mix to be considered. Customer value and price. We talked about this in chapter 13 a little bit, but it's really the price value equation. It's your value and it's perceived benefits and perceived costs. So we talked about benefits and costs. It really does always come down to what the customer is perceiving. So this is probably a little bit more accurate here than in the previous slide that we talked about. If I think I'm getting a good value, and I may not be, but as long as I think I'm getting a good value and it's worth the cost, I'm going to make the purchase. So ideally, most people would want to pay as little as possible and get the best value. And it really comes up to your perceptions. Your perceptions can be based on your experience. It could be your experience with this product or a different product. It could be your experience collecting information, talking to other people, etc. So whatever I think I'm going to get the benefit for it, I'm going to look at how much I've spent on other things of similar value, and I'm going to make my cost benefit analysis. And if it comes out that the benefit outweighs the costs, then I have value. I'm going to make the purchase. There are 3 types of profit strategies: profit-oriented pricing, competitor-oriented pricing, and customer-oriented pricing. For profit-oriented pricing, you're really looking on the finances of the business. So As you know, profit is the revenue less costs. So if we can cut our costs to the greatest amount possible, if we keep our prices the same, we'll have a higher profit margin, we'll make more money. The price per product is typically set higher. That's basically how profits are made. You mark up over the cost of what you spent. And that basically means that you're going to make a profit on every sale. Everybody does this to some degree. It's not like you're going to go back and say, oh, I'm a profit oriented pricing and we don't pay attention to customer oriented pricing. Everybody's going to have to do this if you want to make a profit. The problem is that your customers don't care if you're making a profit. They just want to get the best product possible. And if they can get that from a competitor, they'll do that. They're not going to be empathetic and hold your hand and say, I'm sorry, I'm going to buy it anyway. No, they're just going to go someplace else. Your competitors can also undercut your pricing because maybe they have a better supply chain. Maybe they can get better, higher quality products or cheaper prices. So that can impact your ability to produce at a competitive price. And it can also limit your pricing flexibility. If you are guaranteeing yourself a 5% markup and the competitors are only doing a 4.5% markup, you don't really have a lot of flexibility unless you just kind of overhaul your strategy. For competitive oriented pricing, what you're really doing is looking at your competitors and you're doing everything that you can to try to reduce your costs. Because if your costs are down, your price will go down. The problem is if you're trying to get the cheapest supplies, you may not really understand what the value is to the customer in terms of quality. Because a lot of times, if you're getting cheaper supplies to manufacture your goods, the end result is going to be a less quality or lower quality product. You may also miss the fact that the value that's being provided to the customer, they may value it more. And if you're just trying to give them the cheapest thing possible, they may say, I'm not going to buy that. It's priced too low. People ordinarily just assume that if something is cheaper, it's lower quality. So it's important if you're marketing something at a low price, if it's a good quality, you need to make people be aware of it because people will default and buy something more expensive as a way to ensure getting quality. It's not always the way that it works, but sometimes people just do that as a shorthand solution. Customer oriented pricing, you're really looking at this perceived benefits, perceived costs, this cost benefit analysis. So you want to get away with charging the highest price that still provides value to the customer. You need to know a lot about your customers, figure out who they are, why they bought what they did, the psychology behind it, the subjectivity behind it. That makes it very complicated. But marketing professionals are always trying to get into the brains of their customers and find out what's important to them so that they can adapt the product and, in this case, the price to match what they're looking for. Cost plus and gross margin pricing is when you look at a gross margin to get that profit level. I referred to this a couple of slides before. You basically just say, we're going to make X amount of money over the cost of production. Again, the risk here is in flexibility, and it really doesn't count what the perception is for the consumers. So if they think it's not worth it, and I have to price it that way because my strategy is to make at least a 5% return or a 10% return, I'm going to have to maybe look into redoing this if the competition is taking our market. Markup we've been talking about since the first day of class. So it costs you $14.50 to make a tie. You sell it for $25.13. The markup is $10.73. The difference is what your profit is, and you can do the margin there. So you're looking at probably 70% markup here. The higher the markup, the bigger the profit. The lower the markup, the lower the profit. But the lower the price, because the markup is lower, you may move more of those products. And if you move more of them at a lower profit margin, you may still make more money overall. So it can be very complicated to figure out what the best price is. There are a lot of variables that you need to be paying attention to, both in terms of consumer psychology, the market itself, the competitors, and the supply chain. Discounting strategies include quantity discounts. So if you buy a lot more of something, you buy in bulk, you typically get a cheaper price. That's because if you're going to buy more of it, as we just said, you can make a bigger profit if you move more products, even if your profit margin per item is smaller. You can give seasonal discounts because if we're trying to get rid of something off cycle, if I sell skis in July, they're going to be cheaper. Again, it's a little bit after Halloween. I just went to the drugstore today. They had candy for 70% off. So they need to get rid of that stuff. So you can do seasonal discounts, both for things like Black Friday to try and get people into the holiday season and buying stuff. Typically, if they buy one thing, they may buy more things too. So if you get a discount on one, they may take that perceived savings and buy something else of yours. The other thing that you can do is just to do a sale to get rid of stuff out of season as well. You can give cash discounts. If you pay cash, it's cheaper for the retailer or the manufacturer because if you pay by credit, the credit card fees go to the company. When you go to Target or you go to Walmart and you use a credit card, there's about a 1 to 2 or 3% fee that it costs to use your credit card. That's eaten by the company. If you pay cash, they pocket that fee. They don't have to pay it, so it goes in their pocket. It's more of an advantage to them. The thing is, when you go to Walmart and you pay with cash, you're subsidizing people who pay with their credit card because the price has already been baked in there. The fees that they're paying for the credit cards, it's already in there. They have to charge you the same amount, whether it's cash or credit. You have to be careful in certain jurisdictions. If you go to gas stations, for example, they're one of the few places that can charge different prices based on cash or credit. So if you're a customer, you can actually get a lower price per gallon if you pay cash because you don't have to pay that 1 or 2 or 3% for the credit card fee if you're the vendor. What we're talking about here for cash discounts, though, is not technically or typically on the consumer level. You're talking about manufacturers selling to wholesalers and the credit that they may be giving. If they can pay cash, that's better. For basically the same reason. You get the money in your hand quicker. Time value of money being what it is, it's always worth more to have money in your hand today than it is tomorrow or at some other point. Trade discounts are usually what you give to middlemen, the wholesalers, to allow them to bring in stock of your product and give preferred treatment to get it out to the retailers. So if you want to give a discount to the wholesaler, it may give you an advantage because they'll be more willing to sell your product to the high scale retailers that can benefit your sales in the long run. The last slide here is just talking about other discounting strategies, personal allowances, trade-in allowances. You bring your phone back, they give you money even if it's junk. Price bundling, all of this is related to retaining customers typically. It's to get people to come back for the large part. Cable bundling, if you have cable and you've got internet, you know what that's all about. They give you one price if you buy cable separately, they give you another price if you get internet. If you put them all together, they'll give you a cheaper price on both. And it's a way so, for example, for insurance, if you have home insurance and car insurance and life insurance and it's all through the same insurance company, if you bought three of those separately, they're going to charge you more money, but they want to get your business for all three instead of going to two other companies. So they'll give you a discount because they're going to make more money in the long run that way. That's going to take care of marketing. So we're going to do chapter 9, management, next.